entirely. So you really change the dynamic of the team when you keep switching those roles around, and they finally seem to have settled on MikeYeung and Xpecial, which I think is paying off here at Rift Rivals.
Very impressive when you take into account how young MikeYeung is as a player. Of course, Xpecial, the veteran, potentially a veteran voice for the team, a lot of experience across the lineup. But now back to the first pick. I don't think a Shyvana or a Shaco this time around. We will see what G2 want to optimize. And it's going to be the Elise.
I think the Elise makes sense because when you think of Lee Sin, you don't usually think of Trick. He has not had the strongest of Lee Sin performances. So when we were talking about getting that trade, for a lot of teams, yes, I think that's fine. But in the case of G2, I think you run the risk of not really having a comfort jungler for the side of Trick. So they're going to value that Elise, and I expect a Renekton to come out later on as well.
Yeah, I think the Gragas could still be a thing they can play in the jungle, but that'll flex towards the top lane as well. And I'm curious where the support tier lists come down now, right? Because you have Thresh, Band, Braum, and Tahm Kench are kind of the next two. And very clearly, Phoenix1 say they want Braum. I like this more because one of Ryu's best games was on Corki, and Braum works extremely well with double AD carry compositions, which they could get if they pick the Corki before the next ban phase.
I'd like to see it too, very effective in fights, but it looks like G2, they may not be able to out-team fight with this Tahm Kench pick, but they may be able to outmaneuver P1 when it comes to the mid game. It comes to the Abyssal Voyage. This is something we saw banned the last time these two teams played, but Mithy now happy to get his hands on it.
Yeah, and I think it's the smart pick. If they don't do that, it gets banned out. If they don't pick the Corki right there, I think Ryu locks it in right away. So I'll be interested to see now if Ryu matches mid lane with something like a Cassiopeia, or whether they're willing to go into the second ban phase and have G2 throw bans to them. The Cassiopeia is the safe pick because it matches roles and makes target banning a specific person much more difficult.
The thing that we're really lacking right now from both teams is a reliable form of starting off a fight. Absolutely love the Kassadin to Corki matchup. I had the pleasure of myself picking Corki into Kassadin in my solo queue game. I thought this should be an absolutely fine matchup.
Not a pleasure,
no reason
Vedius.
Why it's not, but it is. It's awful. It's a horrible matchup. The spell shield that you get on the Q pretty much mitigates all of the harass power that Corki does have. So as long as you're consistently trading onto the Corki, he's eventually just going to get bled out of lane, and it is just so obnoxious to deal with. And the fact that the Kassadin will eventually outscale means that it is a very favorable matchup for Ryu.
And on top of that, the passive from Kassadin mitigating magic damage. Oh, Corki, what do your auto attacks do? Oh,
so
magic damage too.
Takes 15% less damage for magic. I like it actually even more when the Kassadin starts Doran Shield, even though that's not a very Ryu thing to do. And then you go into your refillable or corrupting potion. But anyway, good scaling pick there in the mid lane that doesn't actually have that bad of a laning phase into Corki.
And with no top laners locked in on either side, both teams trying to limit the pool. You can see G2 not happy playing up against the Kled. Phoenix1, a similar story with the Gnar. Is it going to remain the priority here? Still waiting on some AD carry picks, as well as those top laners when it comes to the last rotation.
So we talked about a lack of engage coming out from both sides. There is the possibility of going for something like an Ashe. And now with Varus banned away, I feel like she rises in value a fair amount. If you go for, from G2 side, an Ashe and a Tahm Kench, you actually have a pretty potent bottom lane that can hold its own against a lot of different matchups. And I'm not entirely sure if this is really a priority pick or a comfort pick for the side of Arrow, because I believe that during the regular season, this was not something that he actually put a lot of favor towards the Ashe pick.
Yeah, he's generally been a Varus guy in a lot of games, but especially in spring, he did play a lot of the Ashe, Varus, Jhin trifecta. One of the people who still does trend towards Jhin fairly often, but Kalista has also been on his banned against phase fairly frequently, so a lot of options they could go. What is interesting though is that Zig plays mainly Renekton and Kled, just in general, so being able to lock down the Renekton and probably have G2 play something like a Gragas into it, I think P1 is happy with.
Also just a relatively safe blind pick matchup. Interesting to see P1 put the priority onto Arrow to save that final pick for him, and now G2 really taking their time when it comes to this AD carry pick.
And what I'm thinking of is if G2 now go for an Ashe and a Rumble, yes, they will lack a solid front line, but, ooh, okay, so they're going to shake things up a little bit with the Camille. That means they're going to have pretty solid scaling in the later stage, but I'm still concerned about their ability to engage. So I would like them to round things out with an Ashe, so they at least have a way to start fights.
Looks like they may be on the same page as you, of course, Camille. May be able to lock down Kassadin as we move later in the game, and that Rift Walk becomes stronger and stronger. But G2 eSports really debating the Ashe pick overall. Not necessarily the hyper carry pick for Zven, but it does give them the engage options. However, Looks like at the end of the day, it will be the Xayah locked in. So not the engage you may have wanted to see, but definitely a strong carry.
Yeah, I mean, Zven has been playing a lot of Xayah this event, and I feel like most other people have jumped off the Xayah train. He did have that one really good late game against C9, but other than that, I feel like has looked pretty underwhelming on that pick, even in the laning phase. So I'm personally not a huge fan of those last two picks in the draft, and I feel like G2 is going to have to snowball pretty hard off of the Camille in order to make that effective. I love the synergy there of Camille locking Kassadin into the Hextech ultimatum to prevent the late game rift walks away, but aside from that, you got to get pretty late for that to work.
So I think the reason behind the Xayah pick was mainly for an additional form of self-peel, right? Because when you look at the composition, you've got a Renekton who's going to be trying to dive onto the back, then you've got the Cass in there too, Elise in. MikeYeung has had some fantastic kicks onto 80 carries to win a lot of team fights for Phoenix1. Now, because you have the ulti from Zven and you have the Tahm Kench to provide peel, I think it just adds that extra layer of safety while losing an element of an engage. But I completely agree with you, Jatt. I think that early game is going to have to be the focus when you're running an Elise, when you're playing against a Renekton, an Elise, and a Kassadin. Like, there's so much potential for them to get an early lead and then have a really good late game with the Kassadin too, that G2 have to get control of this game very early on.
And it's very interesting too, because if your focus is on the top side and snowballing the Camille, no one's paying attention to that Kassadin in the mid lane. Already a positive matchup that we mentioned earlier, mitigating so much of the damage, but you know that Kassadin is going to be a mid to late game terror, and especially in the hands of Ryu. Well, this is the first chance you're going to get today. Hashtag EU win, hashtag NA win. NA pretty safely ahead last time I checked the vote. Maybe we can get those EU votes up and running. Start to even the scales as we get ready for our first game.
Yeah, it is about 8 a.m. on the West Coast in North America yet, so plenty of League of Legends age viewers will still be sleeping.
You heard Jatt. Sneak it in. Take the vote.
That happens with Reddit threads every day. It just gets snuck in while NA's sleeping, and then you wake up and like, what is this?
We take turns taking control of Reddit.
That's true.
We have the night, you have the day, Jatt. We each get our shift. But it's G2, it's P1. Now, last time P1 took this in an incredibly dominant fashion. No one expected this team to get a win. Well, they got one, and it was pretty insane to watch. This time, though, it could be a different story.
And the last time these two met up, there were a few individual mistakes very early on into the game that allowed P1 to really effectively snowball, but it was also a matter of Arrow on a Twitch, roaming around the map, and very heavily punishing the fact that G2 were not respecting his ability to just move around and find these opportunities. So now the Twitch is gone, I feel like there are a few more avenues and opportunities for G2 to not be afraid of that kind of pick potential, but at the same time, I want to see more from Trick, because fun little stat, we've given a lot of criticism towards Xpecial for dying a lot, getting caught out of position. Trick actually matches Xpecial for the total number of deaths this tournament at 19. Like, this guy has died a lot, and it's a large part as to why G2 have been struggling.
Of course, we'll have to see. The Elise pick was solid for him in one game, not so great in the other. Maybe he can clean it up this time around, and as we mentioned in Champion Select, could be incredibly crucial when it comes to snowballing that Camille on top side. Elise, an absolute dive terror. But of course, PerkZ just, you know, he's being himself. He's laughing in the mid lane. He's having a good time. But Xpecial and Arrow maybe looking to interrupt this Elise early on. Walking around the corner, Zven and Mithy have to be careful, Xpecial in the brush.
Yeah, Phoenix1 have actually tried to harass the Super Pool before. They tried to do it at Raptors, and then they got collapsed on by the duo lane. So here they're actually looking to harass down the people pulling red buff. This is not being very effective as far as I can tell, because they're outnumbered, but they're at least making sure they know where Trick is starting to give MikeYeung a bit of a heads up. The last time they played, actually, Trick did first blood MikeYeung in MikeYeung's jungle, but then was ineffective for the rest of the game.
And what this will also give the P1 bottom lane is the ability to get to the lane sooner and start that early push, so they can try and get the early level 2, assert that lane dominance and get that Kalista roaming, because rolling rather. The thing about that champion is she's a little bit more of an early to mid game champ. We've had a lot of great discussions about this Drakos, where Kalista really does rely on getting that early lead and that early snowball, because against someone like a Xayah, who typically scales very well, when you have a Renekton and a lead on your team as well, you want to try and bully as much as you can during the laning phase.
And I want to see if Phoenix1 can actually win some of these laning phases from a CS perspective. Their early game so far at the tournament has been good, but that's because they're taking down more turrets and getting more kills than the opponent, not because they have any type of CS advantages in lane.
So looking at Trick now, he could be very well going for it. Early invade.
Good ward coming for P1. Zig knows exactly what is happening here. Renekton incredibly difficult to dive, but being a little bit cocky there, walking forward, taking a bit of damage from Trick, can reset tower aggro.
He's dead.
Yeah, he's just gonna walk him down. Well, that's first blood for Trick, folks.
That was the most random first blood I have ever seen.
He knew he was there.
He knew he was there. Trick went over the wall. They even pinged the burst. He drops a ward in it, and then Trick was like, I will kill you.
Yeah, well, essentially what happened from Zig there is he didn't want to burn his flash, and by the time he got jumped on by the Elise, he was out of turret range, so the Elise could just free hit him, and he didn't want to delay it too long for the large wave. I think a pretty big misplay by Zig, to even put the ward to see him there, because at the time, the levels were too low on G2 to actually pull off a successful dive on the Renekton, unless he leaves his turret, and he leaves his turret, gives Trick first blood.
Not good, MikeYeung. Somewhat mirroring the jungle pathing we saw earlier from Trick. Not going to have the same luxury of the face check, but maybe he can get an aggressive gank on the bottom side. Going to be pretty difficult against the Tahm Kench, but matchup already going quite well for P1 3 stacks 4.
How low they can get him.
Trick just looking for the rinse and repeat. Zig, of course, did not burn flash last time.
He's not going to burn flash this time either.
And he gets taken down. All right. This is a strong start for Europe. 2 kills already in the favor of that top side of the map. This is exactly what we wanted to see.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Drakos, because perfect early game start for G2. The fact is, Trick, early game presence. That's what you want to be doing on an Elise. And we wanted to see this Camille get ahead against the Renekton. The laning phase is typically very hard, but now we have a gank in mid.
MikeYeung lead forward, not going to connect on the Sonic Wave, however. He's going to have to back off, trying to get something back after Trick is so active on the map.
Yeah, and picking Camille into the Renekton, bold move and draft, but early on in the game, you can see they had a lot of confidence in doing so. Xpect and Trick have been very purposed about shutting down Zig's Renekton. What you do have to call out a little bit is the fact that MikeYeung would have had an opportunity to be there for counter ganks or support Renekton in the 2v2, where Renekton generally thrives in the early game, but he hasn't done so.
Trick now moving down, Arrow going to throw out, not going to get hit by the cocoon, but does have to immediately heal and flash out. And Trick has just been everywhere on the map.
And this is beautiful from Trick. So like we saw early on in the tournament, where they had a very similar composition with the Elise, trying to snowball the early lead, exactly what Trick wants to be doing. He realizes now top should be able to hold its own. You have a very healthy CS advantage on top of Xpect, and why not just relieve some of the pressure happening down bottom? Now that there are no summoner spells in the bottom lane, I'd love to see a return gank from Trick, and maybe even a package roam from PerkZ down bottom as well.
They look to find the opportunity, but we set our sights top lane. You can see Trade's still doing decent for Zig, has a lot of strength in that kit.
Yeah, Ziggs actually was in a super tough spot there, because the first death from a top laner isn't usually that big, because you get to teleport right back to lane after your short death timer. It's the second death that puts you down because you have to walk back. On top of that, the wave was pushed against him, so he actually just had to do a very risky thing to get that wave shoving. Now MikeYeung is here for potential 2v2.
Stun does come down, look for the hookshot, wall dive. Can he make it out? Xpect with attack sweep to heal up a little bit more, but Trick is taking so much damage, Zig. Incredibly low, but both sides going to walk away.
And of all times, there's his flash right at the end of the 2v2. He did need to do it, otherwise Trick may have executed, and MikeYeung helps out a little bit there. But Xpect is now 6 with still flash, so that lane is just so bad for Zig for a while.
And note as well, Xpect, he's going to go back, he's going to spend some of the gold that he's got, TP back into lane, immediately going to have kill threat on top of Zig. Very squishy this early on into the game. And I feel like that gank could have gone very heavily in the favor of G2. The issue was the cocoon miss from Trick. If you landed it onto a target, they may have been locked down long enough for them to get the additional damage needed to secure a kill, but unfortunately he does miss it, and it will just result in a flash for flash exchange in the top lane.
Now we can see, however, Arrow on the bot side, going to get a little bit of vision for himself, clear out the Scuttle Crab with the power of that Rend. But bottom lane hasn't been the big focus. P1 continuing to push in and getting a CS lead for themselves, something we wanted to see from the individual laners, but unfortunately, now that they finally got the CS lead, they're starting to lose out in the kills.
Yeah, all thanks to Trick really in the early game, but I want to take this opportunity as well to identify a bit of an invade coming out from MikeYeung, especially there will be wards spotting out their movement. They want to try and contest this red.
Yeah, they absolutely see it coming, though, walking across multiple wards. And look at Xpect's roam, coming down towards the mid lane. If they get trapped in the jungle here, they're going to be in a whole heap of trouble.
You may be level 7, but nothing's going to get you out of that cage. Leaping forward, looking to lay the damage down. Corki not going to do a whole lot to Ryu, but Ryu unfazed. Plays it cool, does not burn anything, and it's just going to walk that one out.
Kassadin grabbing himself the early catalyst is just going to make him that extra bit tanky, and no real damage yet completed for Xpect because he decided to go for the early defensive route with the boots.
Yeah, and we are seeing the Kassadin actually is advantaged in this matchup against PerkZ. That's one of the reasons that gank was ineffective, and P1 undeterred with that invade, going for it yet again after Control Ward was swapped out, and MikeYeung ends up getting it. So really just calling to power the level 6 power spike on Kalista and Elise to go into the jungle and get it.
Firing back against G2. Now MikeYeung may look for the play, the flash forward, the sidestep from PerkZ.
I like the noise you just made there.
Yeah, that was an play by MikeYeung. It's not one you really think is going to work. He's got flash exhaust up, and you're going to flash just to, best case, force his flash. He was unsuccessful for sure, but he lost a lot of pressure there and his flash.
And think about what it also means for the bottom lane too, because now Zven and Mithy are able to push that wave into the tower. They will now be able to go back first and spend a little bit more of their gold. They've been able to equalize the CS advantage that both Arrow and Xpecial had built up earlier. And what I'd really love to see is Trick to make a return gank bottom. I'm not entirely sure if Corki has the package or not, but he too could look for an opportunity to roam to either one of the side lanes, because this is something that I feel European teams especially have not taken full advantage of, just the fantastic roaming power that Corki can have once he's picked that up.
Yeah, and even looking at the team composition, you would think the package would line up perfectly with a Hextech ultimatum on a Zig in the top lane, and you 2-man or 3-man dive. But Expect did use that ultimate in the mid lane, you know, a minute and a half ago, so now he has to wait on the cooldown. PerkZ is going to have to sit on that package. He doesn't have very long left on it, so he might try and do it now. It could still work. Instead, he just goes for red.
Moving in. A little bit of counter jungling courtesy of the package. Trick going to take this one away. It's just a trade, though, when we look at what P1 were able to grab on the bottom side.
And fun fact, that is the first red buff G2 has ever stolen in this tournament. So far, they have not been able to steal any, as Ryu has found Mithy.
Yeah, well, they know Corki's not there, so free her ass.
With the 0 isolated deaths, wants to keep it that way, as long as we're listing fun facts in the tournament, is going to be able to do so. Now G2 looking for the tower. P1 going to try to trade back with an Infernal Drake, but they are a bit behind on the play, and that's a bit of bad news for P1.
Yeah, I mean, this has actually been a pretty bad early game for Phoenix1, mainly because of what happened in the top lane, and now the 2,000 gold lead after getting that first turret, because it's not one of those first turrets that actually traded for substantial turret damage. It's just the Infernal Drake that they end up getting off of that, and now Camille is a spectacular person to leave laning phase if you want to get advantages on the rest of the map.
And this is exactly what we wanted to see in pick ban phase. We wanted to see the Camille snowballed in the early laning phase. We said it was the key to success for G2, and they're finally able to execute on that after so many games where we felt like they were just lost all around the map, really playing to their win conditions.
But it's also a big deal that P1 are this behind in the early game, because you have to bear in mind Renekton, Kalista, Elise, these are all champions that are really good at getting you early game leads. And what we've seen so far from MikeYeung this tournament is that he spends a lot of time in the early game invested towards trying to snowball his laners, and so far Trick has just had his number. He's been ahead of the play. He's been able to get G2 this early advantage, and now a lot of the reliance is going to have to fall onto Ryu. He has to be this late game threat, because the rest of the team for P1 is going to start to fall off.
Bit of a tough situation for P1. Zig taking his time to clear out a vision before he heads back top, but without a tower there, with a 2-level deficit, he is going to struggle. Even just to approach the wave here may be difficult, but still doing it. Not too scared, although Expect just going to play aggressive.
It's super risky for him to even get that one CS. Technically, yes, he does have wards in the river, but with the lockdown that Camille has, if anyone approaches from the lane and Camille also Renekton, there's a chance they can actually get that kill. So this lane gets worse before it gets better.
Luckily, the one strong point for P1 right now does feel like this mid lane. Ryu continues to hold a CS advantage over PerkZ, and you can see just how little damage PerkZ is able to do to Ryu right now in these trades. Yes, he can hurt other people on the map, but that Kassadin just pretty impossible to touch with magic damage at this point.
And what you'd normally expect from a team like G2 is that once they have an early lead, they're not the kind of team to let it go as an action happens in the bottom lane.
MikeYeung on the backside, Featherstorm comes out. Mithy can eat a lot of people, but he cannot eat himself. Now going to get eaten up by Arrow, and that's an easy kill for P1. But action going to continue on the top side. Trick coming over the wall, the hook shot, the wall dive, the cocoon, the chain CC, and finally the kill.
Yeah, and that's going to happen for Zig if he's going to try and contest CS anywhere that's not under his own turret. And even then, he might be dove. So even though Phoenix1 did pull off the successful gank in the bottom lane, the disadvantages on the other side of the map are so much greater. So not only do they lose Zig, they're going to lose that turret to the Rift Herald.
G2, they're doing the best they can to answer the pressure that MikeYeung tried to make up for that he wasn't able to do in the early game. And the bottom lane is the best place to go because of how far behind Zig is. But P1 are just going to lose so much in return. And with that Rift Herald, G2, they take a tier 2.
Yeah, and MikeYeung now trying to get control of his own jungle back, but has to respect Expect. And MikeYeung has said before that he wants to play the pro game kind of like he does solo queue. And in solo queue, if your top laner dies really early on to a jungler at level 2 and then dies again, you abandon him. So that's what Phoenix1 is doing right now. MikeYeung is trying his hardest to get advantages somewhere else on the map, but in pro play specifically, that top lane advantage takes over the rest of the map, or at least can, and that's what G2 is trying to do.
Yeah, sadly, the solo queue does not extend to every team. Xpect is free to push that lane, just like in solo queue, but also free to go bot lane and make that advantage grow somewhere else. For now, it's Mithy and G2 just holding the mid lane, waiting to reset that map and look for the next play.
So now we need to keep track of lane assignments for G2 because the tier 2 tower is still up in the bottom lane, and both mid lane towers are up for both sides. So for G2, they're actually going to send PerkZ down to the bottom side of the map. There's no dragon to contest for now, but he does have the package. So in the event that a fight breaks out, he can move up to the top side. But they want to keep Xpect in the lane with Renekton for as long as possible because he's just freely able to get as much farm as he wants. And he now knows that he can win that 1v1 for sure as they try to get a bit of harassment down onto Zven.
Yeah, and Camille's late game scaling is really good. Trinity Force plus Hydra, you can then easily 1v1 anyone on the map. So they kind of want to get to that point, and it does take a little longer for the Kassadin to be relevant. The thing that Phoenix1's going to probably want to play around is when Arrow gets his Blade of the Ruin King, as long as Xpect isn't joining in on those fights, because that gold lead will make a big difference for G2.
And another big thing for P1 that they have to be very mindful of is the fact that they have very little wave clear. Ryu, ooh, and he's using that for wave.
PerkZ!
Controversial strategies coming from PerkZ. Definitely not a good package, but does clear the wave and means that Arrow will have to respond in kind. And gentlemen, just got news from the stats team. This is the first time at 15 minutes that P1 have been in a gold or tower deficit across the entirety of Rift Rivals. So you can see G2 really one of the first teams to punish them here in the early game.
Xpecial's got to be a little careful, actually. He's bluffing here that he has backup, but Xpect could have killed him.
Luckily, he doesn't go for anything more for now. Just about that mid lane pressure. PerkZ, unfortunately, not a real split pushing threat against this Kassadin. And Ryu going to be happy just to throw down a bit of damage and keep PerkZ locked in this lane.
And now what I'd love to see from G2, now that the Trinity Force is done, send Xpect into Ryu's lane. Because I feel like that short Ryu is going to have an absolutely fine time into PerkZ. But I don't think his chances are exactly the same against the Camille, who's already got a Trinity Force at 15 minutes into the game. Corki can just freely farm against the Renekton. He doesn't have to worry about too much. And I don't think that Zig will suddenly come back into the game if he's just allowed a bit of free farm up against the Corki. So I think that it would make more sense if G2 now swap the lanes around, and it would also allow Xpect to start hitting onto this tier 1 tower in the bottom lane. I think the only thing they're mindful of is the fact that Ocean Dragon has just spawned, and TP is up and available for Xpect, so they probably want to keep him on the top side so that they have the TP play ready in the event of that.
Yeah, I think a high chance we get a fight around Drake right here, and Zig at level 10 versus Xpect at level 11. If they're both involved in a team fight, it's not necessarily a fair trade, so P1 have to be very careful if they want to contest this Ocean Drake. And right now, with laning phase mostly done, and yes, Corki is a good poke champion, so you'd want the Ocean Drake. It's not worth the risk, I think, for Phoenix1 to contest it. And they're just going to give it up to G2.
It looks like it is the right call in the end. Phoenix1 backing off. They want to find an avenue back to this game, but it will not be the Ocean Drake. Can't afford to let that lead from G2 grow whatsoever.
So now they have decided to move Xpect into the Kassadin lane. I feel like Xpect will feel pretty confident in this 1 versus 1 as he goes for the stun.
Hook shot holds it, looks for the wall dive onto Ryu. Now locked up, brings in Zven. Sorry, Ryu, no chance to dash. You're just gonna drop.
Beautiful play from G2, utilizing the Tahm Kench ultimate to cut off the escape route of Ryu. And if he still thought he could get away, well, there's a parallel. There's the ultimate for Xpect to lock him down and secure the kill along with the tower.
And that's exactly what you talked about could happen when Xpect goes down into the bottom lane and matches the Kassadin. They can generate kills on the person who needs to be the late game care for Phoenix1. Now I feel like a desperation dive on a PerkZ.
3 stacks. PerkZ looks like he's going to get locked up and taken down, but there's the hook shot, the wall dive, body blocked by Xpecial, and that means Xpect could be next. 4 stacks, but no follow-up from P1.
But look at G2. They're just continuing their push in the bottom lane. They're going to get themselves the tier 2 tower. Imagine if PerkZ still had his flash from earlier after that questionable package play. This will mean that P1 can very likely answer with a tier 1 mid tower of their own. But the fact that G2 got themselves 2 turrets, a kill in favor of 1 turret for 1 kill, still big gains in favor of G2.
But you can see the gold lead, maybe not quite as large as it once was. Difference in Dragons for sure, but at 18 minutes, nothing crazy yet. We'll take a look at this play one more time.
Yeah, nice of Xpec to get the stun, but then it's pretty simple after that. Cast your Hextech Ultimatum near where your Tahm Kench is, and your 3 people will kill the 1 on the other side. That's all they need to do with this composition when they have that lead on Camille, and Camille will not be 1v1 by the Kassadin.
That's the appeal of the pick right there. We thought this lane could struggle against the Renekton. It didn't, and now it just gets to utilize the full power of the Hextech Ultimatum in the face of an incredibly mobile champion. G2, they were happy to work on the bottom side of the map, but now with some towers taken down, looks like their focus is on the top side.
I really appreciate that you both said the name of Camille's ultimate, because I completely
you said parallel convergence. It's okay. You cast what's Xpecial and
it's QWER to me, man. It's QWER. But the Tiamat has now been finished for Xpec. That means he's going to have a little bit more wave, a little bit more pushing power off in the side lane. And Ryu is going to struggle to be able to really have get to that late game point that makes him such a threat. I'm a little surprised that he's going for the Lichbane before the Zhonya's. I feel like that if he wanted to hold his own a little bit more, it might have been smarter, as MikeYeung has found Trick.
Trick goes up, comes down, has to flash right out to safety, but Mithy is there with the Devour if he needs it. And P1 continuing with the aggressive jump plays. PerkZ gonna look for the save, but Ryu not gonna give him the chance. You want to know why he gets the Sheen, and that is why.
Yeah, that could be a problem for G2 if Rio's just solo killing PerkZ in the side lanes. And aside from Xpec's Camille, the game is close. And then a lot of it will come down to who can make the plays in the right way. Because Xpec and Trick, when they group up, they can make plays happen. But Ryu, Arrow, Xpecial, MikeYeung, all those guys can also make plays. So this 1,500 gold lead, that's 2 or 1 big play away from being equal.
Zig looking to make that play with the help of Arrow and Xpecial. But Xpec backing off, not getting too greedy, not pushing too far forward, not looking to make any mistakes here as the rest of G2 set pressure in the mid lane.
Just keeping an eye, what's the next best play for both these teams? Because Baron is up and ready, and ooh, love that interaction there from P1. They just used to engage
in. They want to start the fight. Xpecial goes forward, sees the opportunity for the ult, but there's not enough follow-up here. PerkZ on the way in with the package. Ryu a bit too far behind. Not quite sure what P1 had planned there, but now they have to be careful. Using the package as the escape.
The face call there by the Kalista actually did expend the cooldown of Xpec's ultimate, so very good timing on Arrow there to get Xpecial basically out of jail free, but then the re-engage was a little questionable with both their solo laners in base and G2 having the entire siege, and they're just going to keep pushing with 5.
Happy to have it. Easy to take it away. It looked so good for Xpecial when he hit so many members with that ultimate, but unfortunately no backup. The members of P1 not there. There's a fly on the desk. Jatt's trying to kill it.
You don't have to talk about that.
I think it's funny, though. I think it's so funny.
I thought he wanted to tag in, and he was just like, I have something I really want to say. But now the Lichbane will be finished for Ryu. He will be that big sliding threat. And against PerkZ, he has a huge amount of kill pressure. We've already seen him get that solo kill down onto the Corki, and it just speaks homage to how strong this matchup really is for the Kassadin. There's very little that the Corki can do. Even as the game progresses, things will not get easier. So it's very important for G2 that they keep Xpec in the lane against Ryu, because Xpec will reliably be able to hold his own, especially if he goes for a Hex Drinker after his Titanica.
Yeah, it is a little bit easier said than done, though, because Zig can technically match Xpec if he's just willing to match him at the turret. And then with double TP versus just the 1 TP, they're going to be able to kind of pick their own lane assignments, so to speak, and try and 1-3-1.
And the thing is, when we look at the last time G2 were able to have a successful early game, it was against Cloud9, and it led to a very unsuccessful mid-game. But Zig, unfortunately, not trying to match him under the tower, trying to match him in the jungle. Doesn't look like he's going to get the opportunity. One more hookshot wall dive will make it over the wall. Tag sweep's not going to connect, and that's the walkaway. Meanwhile, Elise has gone down, and P1, they just set their sights on the Baron.
Yeah, they can try for it because Zig will be able to get full health and teleport in. I think they'd rather bait the Baron than do the Baron, especially with PerkZ Rockets being able to poke. But the threat is there, and if you're going to walk up like MikeYeung is, you have to have a sweeper, otherwise they're going to see you.
Leaping back, Xpecial going to get the knockup. Xpec running to safety. PerkZ gets deleted from the fight, and now, oh, this is not what Xpec wanted. He's running for his life. He can fight Zig, but he cannot fight. Arrow, beautiful block comes in from Xpecial on the Featherstorm, and that's just a one fight for P1.
Yeah, now even more reason to turn on the Baron, and I have to criticize G2 right there. When you see Elise sit on a ward when you're outnumbered, just don't walk forward. You know they are not doing the Baron, but they do, and now they're definitely doing the Baron.
And with the Kalista there, backed up by Elise, it is nigh impossible to stop it. Trick is alive, but he is simply too far away. That is Baron for P1, and suddenly the team finds themselves with a lead.
And we have to find out how Trick lost his life, because that's where all of this started. Expect he tried to go for a 1v1 off in a side lane, but this is where things really started to fall apart for G2. So they're just trying to get themselves some vision, and Trick gets caught out. He's trying to clear out the walls, get some vision around the Baron area. He cannot actually see in the river itself. And then he ends up getting caught off. And Expect, he tried to go for that 1v1 in the top lane. He doesn't have an ulti. He's already lost about a third of his HP. And Zven and Mithy, they're behind. And with that, at least they're to find some kind of a pick. It's very easy for the rest of P1 to just get themselves the collapse.
Yeah, moving aside from G2, just not, they shouldn't have walked in there. Thinking about their team composition in an even game like this now, where they're a low front line, they have to be the one making plays. Because if you're a mostly squishy team with just a Tahm Kench, and the other team jumps on you, the fight's almost always going to start as a 4v5 because whoever gets jumped on is going to die.
And you talked about that Braum earlier. It may not be paired with a double 80 carry composition, but there's 2 80 carries on the side of G2. He throws up that Unbreakable, and there is no damage coming out from the side of G2 outside of Expect. And suddenly things looking a little bit grim. Of course, G2 not out of options whatsoever, but definitely have to survive this Baron buff. For now, it's just going to be a hold. Suddenly, they are not the proactive team anymore.
But if we could also just look at the gold difference between the individuals right now, because you can see that Ryu is 1.2k gold up on top of PerkZ. PerkZ is still yet to complete his second item. He is having such little impact in this game that it's going to be difficult as Ryu's been caught.
Trying to find a way out. Rift walk away, looking for the juke. Hook shot, wall dive. You just cannot get away from a Camille and an Elise.
Yeah, if he did have the Zhonya's, though, as you talked about earlier, he would have been able to escape. But then he also may not have been able to get some of the solo kills early. That's the situation that G2 needs to create if they want to win, and P1 is the opposite of that. Anytime Camille gets to fight Kassadin, G2 walks away with an advantage. That's why their gold lead typically is on the Camille and the Elise. Those are the strong members. But the rest of that squad, the Corki, Xayah, Tahm Kench versus Braum, Kalista, Kassadin, that's not even close in favor of Phoenix1. So the map needs to stay split, and both these teams need to play to their strengths if they want to win.
Right now, it looks like P1 may have an advantage, at least in terms of vision. They see everything in the G2 bottom side, and PerkZ still feels confident to push up the mid lane, but, you know, kind of has been a bit too aggressive with how far forward he's been playing.
G2 there, their backs are against the wall. They did have a great early game, and they took a lot of the structures all across the map, and they couldn't really keep that momentum going. I love the fact that P1, they were trying to be proactive. They were trying to find avenues, and it was very much just setting up vision around Baron. They were always slightly ahead of G2 on the play, and that forced G2 into a situation where they were trying to face check, and that allowed P1 to find this pick and gain more control over the map. The gold is still very even, though, and I think this is still a very close game with very clear win conditions on either side.
Yeah, it's an incredibly negligible Baron power play up until this point, and Camille is spending a lot of time pushing this wave down in the bottom lane. Actually needs to be immediately responded to at this point by Zig, and Phoenix1 didn't make a play off of that whatsoever. Actually, Zig has a teleport disadvantage against Expect at the moment, but will make it back to defend. It just means the Baron power play is going to be extremely low.
Maybe not what P1 wanted to see. They even up the game with the Baron, but they're not able to get a greater advantage or break an inhibitor. This tower score not even going to get evened out by that play. Still in the favor of G2, 5-4. However, a much more even game than it was prior to the Baron, and suddenly Phoenix1 definitely have a chance here to get out from under the strength of that Camille.
I think the biggest thing, though, for both these teams is the scaling of their compositions. Because we talked about it earlier on, and we said that for P1, they're always going to have that Kassadin late game. That's always going to be a threat. But Kalista's late game damage will certainly fall off, especially against 280 carries and the fair amount of mobility that they have on their squad. So we might not have time for that because there's more action in the bottom lane.
Way down, the Titanic Hydra dishing out so much damage, but this is the TP coming in from
bait,
Ryu.
maybe.
Expect has to be careful. Trick on the way in as well. Mithy is here, but no one in the belly.
Oh, fight going down to the jungle, too.
Zven getting hungry. Now getting kicked back. PerkZ has to be careful. Looks like he's just going to get deleted. Arrow is a monster this game. Are they going to hunt for the kill? The face call comes out, but we don't have time to watch it. We have to set our sights on the bottom lane. Look at the fight above us. Zven running for his life. 2 stacks, 3 stacks. Not going to find the 4th quite yet, though, and that means Zven is going to make it to safety. 4 members grouped on the side of G2, but they are in no man's land, and that's going to be Mithy getting taken out.
And And the thing is, for G2, they're the ones trying to be proactive with Expect, but at this point in the game, Zig is tanky enough that he can just buy time for the rest of his team to join the fray. And rather than having G2 try and push something elsewhere, they actually try to collapse too, and that is where P1 found advantages, found picks, get a bunch of kills, and they're the ones that come out ahead.
Yeah, they found a way to switch up the pattern, which I think was the big thing there for Phoenix1. Knowing Expect would jump on Zig whenever Zig isn't near a turret, they planned to teleport, knew it wouldn't be matchable, and came ahead on the play.
Ryu playing incredibly aggressively, but now P1 not just ahead on that individual play, getting the tower in their favor as well, starting to grow the gold lead that the Baron helped them secure. 2K up in their favor. G2 need to clean it up.
And the thing is, I feel like, going back to the point that we were just discussing earlier, like G2, I feel, have the better scaling. Corki late game, Xayah late game. Sure, Corki into the Kassadin is going to be rough, but in terms of team fight damage, Corki still has a lot of damage. Like, in team fights, he can still hit really hard.
But not if he keeps dying.
Yeah, not if he keeps dying, but I'm just saying in the sense that when you have a Xayah, when you have the Corki, and a Camille, a 5v5 later on into the game means that there is still a lot of damage available for G2 as we look back on this play from earlier.
Yeah, I think when they get their Infinity Edges on their carries is when they might pull ahead, depending on the way the fights start. But watching this, right? We talked about how Zig needs to sit under his turret. He's not sitting under his turret, so Expect immediately goes to jump on him. Doesn't kill him as fast as he would like, but this is the fight we didn't get to see. Again, PerkZ was thinking about harassment, but he just didn't have his team with him. The Tahm Kench ditched to go help out on the skirmish, which forced a 2v3 in the jungle.
And he had full vision as well of the river. He knew exactly what was going on as Expect now dead.
Oh, on the backside of the play,
Ryu has arrived.
Kill, and PerkZ is caught out again. The chain CC 3 stacks 4 and deleted.
Yeah, and the level 16 Kassadin, when the level 16 Kassadin isn't getting hit by the Hextech ultimatum, is the Omniscaler in this matchup. So Ryu going off a little bit, Arrow also going off in this game. They've created another set of picks. Now they're going to try and push. There's no Baron, so the wave clear still could technically be there from Zven, but it's going to be a tough hold.
And I love the proactivity from P1, constantly getting deep vision, constantly looking for picks to break into the bases. G2, their backs against the wall.
coming in to keep the minion healthy. Featherstorm comes out, but Zven going to get eaten up by Mithy. Kicked right back by MikeYeung. Mithy looking for another tower to keep his 80 carry safe, but there are no options left. MikeYeung, where are you going to click it? Don't even need it. Ryu going to pop it up. That's 2 picked up from P1. Trick is running for his life, and P1 are going to break open the base.
Credit to MikeYeung there, getting the 2-for-1 kick. You wait until Tahm Kench devours someone, you kick them both into your team. Ooh. Trick gets one back, though.
Fire's back, but P1 still knock open the base. They have to be careful now, though, because Expect is on the way.
Arrow is really strong.
Hook shot, the wall dive, now backing off. Trick wandering forward, slowing him down with the red buff.
But bear in mind, the Baron is alive, so if G2 can get a single kill here, they can turn for an objective.
Expect playing with his food. Hook shot, the wall dive, the tack sweep to slow him down. PerkZ is on the way, he has the package, but he is waiting to pull that trigger. Will he fire the payload? Expect weaving in and out. Cocoon, Zig taking up so much of the front line damage here. Has to back off. There's the Hextech ultimatum. They're looking for the Renekton. Can they get it? Xpecial blocking the damage. The Fate's call comes in. Expect is on the backside. They're waiting for the red, but they cannot find it. Trick gonna go up. A brief pause, but he comes down. Didn't think he'd have his own. There's Mithy! Suddenly, G2 are looking to turn this right back. The double 80 carries may not be enough. Xpecial is holding on with an inch of his life, but the Zhonya's from the Spider is gonna save the day.
Perfectly played team fight from G2, constantly dancing in and out of the fray. Such an extended fight that will result in a Baron going in favor of G2.
What goes up does not necessarily have to come down. Trick proves right here as he pops his Zhonya's and baits Phoenix1 into this. MikeYeung could try first, nobody's too late, and now he might fall too.
Locked in the pit, MikeYeung, signed, sealed, delivered. The Baron gonna drop for G2, and this game is just so back and forth.
And it all started with the pick onto Ryu down in their own base.
Yeah.
They feel like that they can go for the chase with the 3v2 because the amount of mobility they have is constantly in and out. And Expect at this point you think he's got to die. Surely he's going to die. And Arrow overcommits trying to get the kill. He ends up getting cocooned, and this is where things start to turn.
Arrow doesn't get his rend off on Camille. Then the Zhonya's bait by Trick as Tahm Kench comes down. Funnily enough, the Zhonya's was so loud you could barely see the Tahm Kench ulting in with his Abyssal Voyage. They get extra kills. They get MikeYeung afterwards. Trick created almost all of that. He's the one who picked Ryu's Kassadin. He's the one who baited with Zhonya's, and also the one who cocooned MikeYeung after he tried to jump into the pit to steal.
And it's so exciting to see G2 turn a game back, but this is starting to feel just like their game against Cloud9. So back and forth, so many small mistakes to give advantages back, but P1 still felt like they were in control so much, but that single overstep and G2 taking advantage back.
Yeah, Zven's damage is fairly real right now, but P1's still going to be pretty strong, and they want to fight.
Xpecial leaping forward, using the Unbreakable, does not block the Featherstorm, but Zig on the backside may look to find Zven. The fight continues. Camille's on the top side looking for the inhibitor. Ryu just slowing the team down, but P1 need to get something here because they're losing towers in the meantime. The Blade Caller, though, going to find the disengage. That means that Inhib is going to drop in favor of G2.
And all G2 had to do was run. They just had to kite. And Zven was such a big part of that as they go for the re-engage.
Mithy leaping forward, but PerkZ going to get eaten up. Does he have time to proc the thick skin? It looks like he will. PerkZ now running for his life. MikeYeung on the front line. The Blade Caller comes in.
Here comes Camille.
You can see why he loves that pick, but suddenly it's Expect on the backside. The hook shot, the wall dive. What can he block with the Hextech ultimatum? It's going to buy a bit of time. Ryu now sealed up. That's the double kill coming in for Zven. G2 are starting to route P1. But Arrow continues to play back, continues to dish out the damage. The Zhonya's continues to save the day.
It's a little bit ridiculous that G2 was all alive after that fight because there were about 4 people that looked like they were 1 hit from death, and none of them died. Clutch devours by Mithy, clutch Zhonya's across the board. We're going to watch this one more time.
So this is when the re-engage happens. Earlier on, G2 did a great job of just kiting back, and I think it's questionable why you'd bring your Corki into the middle of 3 members, but it was all just a bait. They're all just buying time, waiting for Expect to come in from the flank, and then people are like, okay, we'll just kill you then. Things start to get really dicey, but then G2, with some really good coordination, are able to come out ahead.
And we talked about the Infinity Edge power spikes that G2 was going to have, and it's Zven who's actually doing a whole bunch of damage. Really got to credit specifically his Blade Callers in these fights. He's getting the roots at just the right time, time and time again. I mean, he's the reason that Ryu couldn't chase through on Kassadin. It's really difficult when they're pulling off that 4-1 they were with Expect taking the top inhibitor to not get run down by level 16 Kassadin, but that's what they accomplished.
And to me, Expect and Trick set up the early game for success, but now here in the late game, it's Mithy and Zven who are making so much happen. And now as G2 group on the bottom side, P1 are going to need to think up an answer and quick, because as we talked about earlier, not a lot of wave clear to stop the Baron, and 20 seconds still remain.
Yeah, they can still get a pick and turn it around. PerkZ has been dying a whole bunch. Zven also doesn't have a QSS. If they can get the right person killed early, they can still turn this around. I mean, you look at the gold, it's 1,000 away, but the momentum is totally on the side of G2.
Pushing in, maybe looking for a little bit more. Empowered cannon creep. Buff will start to fade away here momentarily. Fortunately for Zig, Expect pretty easy to walk in there.
I mean, Zig has had such a miserable game. When's the last time you saw Renekton with a non-upgraded team up?
Well, when's the last time you saw Kassadin get away there? But it looks like Ryu will find an exit out. Suddenly it's Trick who's in trouble. No chance to Zhonya's that one. No time to go golden. It's PerkZ who's going to get knocked up. Expect running for his life. The hook shot, the wall dive to interrupt MikeYeung. Zven the flash forward, the aggressive move. Arrow now hungry for blood. The Blade Caller, the Feather Storm. Where is it going to go? Mithy trying to save. How many feathers can he call back? Will he catch them in the wall? Not going to find them. That means Mithy is the sacrificial lamb. Zven is running for his life. Can he take down Zig?
PerkZ is killing a turret, by the way, when they didn't chase him down at the end of the fight.
Well, now Mithy.
It's just delay as long as they can.
Oh, wait a second. PerkZ is on the way. Oh no, MikeYeung. Leaping over the wall, Zven now just going to get taken out. I think Ryu's going to kill PerkZ as well. Okay. Hey, what just happened in this fight?
It was an ace for P1. Beautiful fight for them. You do have to give credit to P1, the fact that they decided to lock down onto the solo laner, but it was all over the shop.
We got to watch the death timers here, though, because it's still pretty long for a lot of people on G2. Yes, PerkZ got a turret, which delayed his death and extended his death timer. Yes, they got a Nexus turret, but at what cost? I mean, this is an exposed inhibitor. A minion wave is in the mid lane. You have 3 people still dead. It's just Trick and Expect. I think they could have been greedy and 5-man push to try and win the game, but they're not doing it.
Don't want to take the risk here. They've been winning the fights. They've been coming out on top, and luckily we have a replay to understand exactly what happened in that last exchange.
So what you do is you just keep as much wave clear as you can bot, and then you use the dual power of Ryu and Zig to try and lock down Expect. This actually baits G2 into trying to help, and so then you have a 5 versus 3 with which PerkZ and Zven can't really join into the fray on. And then at this point, the rest of G2, they just split up, and it's divide and conquer for P1.
Yeah, Mithy couldn't quite get the Devourer on Trick, so the chain of saves was broken. They do finish off Expect as well, and then this is kind of where chaos happens, and you have to try to ad-lib as much as possible. Zven and Mithy survived for a really long time, and P1 is trying to take everyone, and PerkZ realizes, hey, no one actually chased me. I'm going to take a turret. This is great. But then Kassadin finishes him off on the back end anyway. I really have to emphasize that I think the game could have ended after Phoenix1 if they would have just pushed mid, but they chose not to. So I think, all things considered, this worked out for G2 because they killed more structures.
And just such an odd exchange in the end. And And correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like so many fights in this game have been decided by good usage of Xayahs. In that last fight, G2 overcommits onto Ryu. Fights before, teams have overcommitted onto the surprise Elise Xayahs. Interesting to see how impactful that item has been across fights.
And I think the reality is for G2 is they should have just left Expect and push bot. They should have traded his life for an inhib, and then they just try and disengage again, because that's the role of the split pusher. And unless it's a 1v1 that they go for the collapse, that's the only time you try and go for it.
Yeah, and Phoenix1 want to control Elder Dragon because they have Kalista, but they don't have a base. So G2, I think, is going to try and get mid-priority while this Dragon is happening. Where's PerkZ going to go? They're a little bit indecisive, actually. Instead of pushing waves, they're going to try and go for a fight. This could be the game-deciding fight.
Expect's over the wall, but Ryu is already hot on his heels, hunting down the Kalista.
Now they just got to go for base.
G2, keep your eyes on Expect. He's going to flash for the wall. Ryu's chasing him down. Not
Missed
a whole
his
ton of
force
options
pulse.
left.
Going.
Abyssal Voyage has
recalls.
delivered. Is this the signature EU backdoor? What are they going to do? Ryu does manage to take down Expect. But it looks like PerkZ going to try to take one inhibitor. Meanwhile, on the top side, Zven and Mithy will look to grab another one, but P1, they're not going to have it. Not giving it away for free, at least at this point. Ryu TPing in on the backside. Zven's ultimate has been blocked. He has been stunned up. Mithy, I don't know if you can save him. Spits him out, trying to blast cone himself, trying to make a pick. Playing the mind games, backing off, trick on the way in. Zven still making it out to safety. MikeYeung trying to come over the wall. Can he kick him back into the team? Trying to find the kick. Is going to get him stunned up, and Zven going to get taken down.
Okay, here's the question, though. They've done it again. They have long death timers that happen on the P1 side of the base. It is a timing game of whether or not this super minion can help them push through for win, or if PerkZ should even complete this recall, because he could technically threaten. He does. There's now nothing threatening Phoenix1's base, and they have a temporary 5v3 in the base. 5v2. Here we go.
It's a struggle to keep track.
TP is available for Expect, though. All G2 have to do
If
is
PerkZ would have hidden, they could have tried to. It's going to be a tough stall.
Is Expect going to do it?
Counting
No,
down.
they have to stop this push.
Sig pushing in for a little bit more. Expect doing what he can. Tactical sweep somewhat blocked by the Unbreakable.
They're gonna commit.
P1 pushing for a little bit more. 15 seconds on Zven. 14 on Trick. The 3v5. PerkZ, what can you do to save your team?
Kick.
Now knocked back. P1, they're going in. They don't even waste a moment. They're going to go for the jugular. Arrow's going to end the game. My God, P1. What a win.
Back and forth and back again, as is the NA versus EU rivalry from time to time. But Phoenix1, in the end, run down enough scrappy kills against G2, who could never quite get the split just right enough. And that's their third win of Rift Rivals.
I am floored, gentlemen. The amazing play, and that man at the front of the line, Ryu, you have to praise him, because when the team could not find the early game leads, it was the counter pick in the mid lane, it was the Kassadin that set them up for success. And Arrow as well on this Kalista, this Korean duo, the ones that had been underperforming in the NA LCS are looking like absolute monsters on the Rift Rivals stage.
And I loved how proactive P1 were constantly being in that game, because there was always that ticking time bomb of the Xayah, the Corki, the late game potential of G2 just really outscaling. But it got to a point in the game where they found a massive pick onto Trick. P1 had the ban, they were in full control of the game. Then it was another single pick onto the Kassadin where G2 get a good fight. And it was just constantly these one single picks onto key players that were swinging the game back and forth, and in the very end, it was simply a matter of P1 grouping, finding the great fights, G2 being spread out and just not being able to make the correct decision right in that very moment.
And I feel like P1 had clear goals, even when at a deficit. Hey, this is what we're going to try to do. But on the opposite side, G2 just struggled.
It was very strange, and I do feel like Phoenix1 does have more cohesiveness since they've picked up Xpecial and added MikeYeung to this team. By no means is this the clean victory you want. I mean, a lot of very questionable things happened early on, especially in the 39-minute game where Zig doesn't have an upgraded Tiamat. Like, that was miserable for Renekton. But the fact they won in spite of some of the things that happened in that game, you have to commend them. 3 wins, guaranteed at least a 500 record at Rift Rivals. Not what people expected from Phoenix1.
Definitely not. Well, Phoenix1 got their win here in our first match of the day. Let's send it over to the analyst desk for a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Drakos, and as Jatt there said it, Zig was having a really hard game on that Renekton, and I think we want to get into that replay right away, because G2 really wanted to target that top lane and get a couple of kills there. So first up, from the jungler's perspective, because this is what the desk's all about, how good is this?
From the jungler's perspective, I see it so many times where the laners they have been communicating. You're like, hey, the enemy jungler is probably coming up right now to gank you, and they go to ward the brush that you tell them the jungler is probably in, gets hit with the cocoon.
But I think this is just the power of like Elise. I think Sig is even playing it fairly safe. He's letting Camille push in the matchup, but Elise just kills him. And then if his jungler is not supporting him when the wave is crashing back towards G2, and then they can just punish for free.
The second part of the replay is the biggest one. As you said, when he goes for the second gank, not only have you just used your teleport, the wave is also pushing away from Zig's turret. So generally you need your jungler to come help you, complete that push. And that is where Trick really kind of gave G2 a big early game lead with the second gank.
So later, MikeYeung does come up to help, but I feel like it wasn't for the wave. It was just to try and get a kill back in return. At that point, Amazing, do you just let that lane go because it's all over there?
I mean, I think MikeYeung already made the conscious decision to almost like drop the wave and drop the lane early game. So like coming back at some point is just like, pat on the back, here, I have some like something for you, but it doesn't really help at all. So at that point, you just have to like find other win conditions and really just like, just get leads on the bottom lane or mid lane, at least find some control in the game.
Yeah, they found the win conditions later on. I do want to say G2 obviously got off to a great start, something that hasn't happened for EU teams. And EU teams had won 1 out of 5 games where they had a lead at 20. G2 had a lead at 20, so we knew that they were not going to win, and that was
also remember the lead that they got is the exact place they want to with this comp on the Camille, so she can actually bypass the early power of Renekton and get to that split pushing.
And some of the power of Camille is that in this game they have double TP with both Kassadin and Renekton. But because Camille is ahead, he can actually split push against both and win. So suddenly they have a one side at least where they will win, and then they just need to make sure that they can get mid control, and then they will control two waves and get pressure that way around. But they kind of failed on that.
Yeah, so explain to me this next replay how Trick gets caught and P1 actually set a big foot towards winning the game.
So here I think Trick is just not respecting the fact that P1 has river control and they have pressure on both top and mid, where they just need to group up in mid and get priority on the wave and then use that. But instead they're face checking, and then P1 is catching them one by one, and then we see what happens.
Yeah, the odd thing about it was just that Xpec got priority at that very moment in the bot lane through a 1v1 fight. So all they needed to do is actually to have someone catch top wave, but not even at that point. Just walk down mid lane, wait for Xpec to come in from the side lane, and then they get full control over Nashor. But them just greeting for waves and on the top side of the map was just really irritating at that point.
It was something we actually talked a bit about off air. Is EU teams are kind of not understanding when they have tempo and when they have to maybe sacrifice a wave in order to get tempo back on the map so they can pressure the game. Because Camille is really set up to actually win the game alone, but he's not being supported by a team in order to do that. So.
Or at the wrong points. We're going to take a look at a next replay where Expect chooses to pick a fight with Renekton in the bottom lane, which could be a good idea, but it turns completely on its head.
Yeah, the thought process behind it is obviously there. Like they thought, okay, we have numbers advantage because we have the Tahm Kench coming in at some point, but they completely miscalculate their damage and they just expect to kill Zig and one-shot him, but instead on the transition, they get caught in their own jungle. They don't even kill Zig in the end, and the Tahm Kench ultimate becomes something that's completely useless at that point, and Ryu just is able to clean up in the end.
Don't want to call out too many personal people, but PerkZ didn't really have an impact in this game. He died a lot also in these exchanges where they might have had a 5v5 in the end and had kind of a bigger chance, so it's not his tournament.
He had an impact. It's not a
positive
not for his own
indeed. Well, but good stuff on Phoenix1. Another win on the board for them. That's 3.
Yeah, and something else that we did see in this game that we've seen from a lot of the North American teams is everyone's like, oh my God, the engage that North America are drafting and all the hearts you see. Yep. But they're using control wards and they're using Fog of War, and it makes it look really easy for them to land this engage. That pick onto Trick, and then the pick on the rest of G2 right after around Baron. It looked very easy for them to do.
Phoenix1 making it look easy, starting day 3 with a win. Let's check out QuickShot and whoever he's with.
Thank you very much, Sharks. I am with Xpecial, one of the longest standing pro players. It's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of shoutcasting your games. We've been interviewing you. First of all, congratulations on your win. Third one here at Rift Rivals. Dude, Phoenix1 are not the 6th place team everyone expected. Why is that?
I have no idea. I wish I could say that there was some magic pill that we took that was like, oh, everything's great. But honestly, we just worked really hard. We worked really hard for as long as I know. And when we got to the team, we started to click slowly, and we've been improving a lot. We had some losses here and there. We lost to TL not too long ago. But for us to beat Immortals and come here and do really, really well, I think to me means matter more than winning this tournament or anything like that. I think just our growth as a team is the most important thing.
Definitely when you look at how this particular game played out as well, losing early, coming back in a crazy mid-game. You guys are sitting at 3-2. The only team that has taken you down here at Rift Rivals was Fnatic. There is a real shot that P1 could represent North America in the finals. What would that mean if you guys were there instead of TSM or C9?
Well, I think that TSM is a really good team. I think that they, despite our score, I think they should deserve to represent us. And I think that the best chance in a BO5. For us, we've been improving a lot, but we have so much more to go. And I don't want this to be a situation where we show too much of our cards and give NA a good reason to be scared of us. I want them to be like, oh, P1, they suck. They're 8th place, you know? Like, I want that instead.
There we go. There's the double bait, right? Psych everyone out. One last question here, Xpecial. Phoenix1, of course, placed 3rd in spring. You subbed into the team about, what, 3 weeks ago? There or thereabouts. When you go back to North America, what are you taking with you from Rift Rivals?
Well, we're taking a lot of actually expectations. I think teams see that we're not the worst team in NA, and they're going to be like, oh, we're going to have to be ready for this team. And which kind of sucks because our score doesn't represent that. You know, when you're usually doing really poorly, they're underestimating us, and we have like this couple of weeks where they don't expect it, but because we're coming out with so many games here and doing so well, teams are going to be off the bat ready for us. And that's a scary thing. And hopefully we can power past that. And if we do, then it means we're in a really good spot going to the playoffs and Gauntlet in the Worlds.
Well, first and foremost, congratulations on the win and best of luck when you get back to NA.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to head to an ad break. When we come back, Rift Rivals continues.